Welcome back to the virtual classroom for Comp 3077. This is Mike once again, your voice in the videos for this latest iteration of Comp 3077 online. We are now in week 10, and week 10 is a pretty cool week. We're going to talk about the content of the case in a minute. We are going to throw a couple reminders in there. Textbook resources. So I've had a few students over the last couple weeks as we've gotten into more complicated stuff in weeks 8 and 9, wondering if there's extra stuff they can look at. And I just want to remind you guys where some of this stuff is. And I want to remind you that there's a custom project coming up in a few weeks. So might be a good idea to look ahead at that if you wanted to just check out what it's all about and stuff. So for the textbooks resources, first place you can go is here. And when you're in here, once you log in to your course in Mind tab, there is a full book link here on the right. And you can go through all the contents of the chapters. And if any of you would like to have additional exercises to work on, your professors can create an additional folder and put it down below the rest of this content. We don't usually do that because sometimes it gets confusing and then students are like, oh, do I need to do this? Do I not need to do this? It's like the training. The training is not required, but it gives you the answers to the quizzes. But we can do additional case style stuff if you ask for it. I don't know that any of you would want to do extra cases. You never know. But that's where the book is. And you can go through the book in that way. And then in addition to that, every week in FOL content, which is where I am for week 10 already, there is chapter notes from the textbook where the case was taken that are only really provided to the professors, but they offer a great summary of what is covered in the chapter. I mean, in addition to the slides I show at the beginning of the video each week, so you can download those from here as well. And that's why there are references down here at the end of each week, because we're using those slides from the textbook. We don't teach with them, but when we get into the latter cases, there are students that ask for extra stuff sometimes just to make sure they have a full breadth of understanding. And of course, guys, if you're in a face-to-face class, that's what lab is for. If you want a little extra help, just go to lab. I know a lot of you get really attached to the videos because you can pause me and slow me down and you can work at your own pace, but the labs are really useful. And most of the professors will make sure you get a really good mark before leaving lab on your cases, where otherwise your mark is your mark, right? So, and that's not to say that we don't have professors online for at least an hour or two each week, which is a requirement for these online courses where you could get help from them too to make sure that you get the best mark you can on your cases. If you jump ahead to week 13, there are some very detailed instructions for this custom project, and we're only a few weeks away, so I just wanted to point it out because it is worth a fair chunk of your mark, more than a weekly case and quiz. Not 5%. I don't know why in the particular section I'm in it says 5%. It's not 5%. I just wanted to show you where that was, and that'll be corrected probably by the time you see this by your professors. It's 11%. Custom project, 11% of your mark. Okay, and those are the numbers from the course outline. Just ignore that 5. I'm actually going to send an email as soon as I'm done with this video to make sure other sections don't have that. I don't know how that snuck in there, but it's 11% of your mark, and it's a fairly substantial project. There will not be a video on it. Everything in the instructions for that project we've covered. So just a couple reminders I wanted to go over with you guys, and then what are we covering in week 10? So for week 10, this one is all about automation and sort of using Excel to set up forms for your store or for an HR process or something like that. And there's also a tool that we cover in the earlier part of this case called a macro, which is a really neat tool that you can use in other applications as well. What it does is it records your actions. It records what you're doing. And that's part of the automation bullet here. But we are going to have to add some menu items. We're going to alter the menu a little bit to get the macro recording toolbar up. So we're going to cover macros. We're going to deal with comments, which you should be comfortable with at this point because you see them a lot in your graded files from SAM. When you get something wrong, they add that little hash into the cell, and if you hover over it, there's a comment in there. Those are very easy to insert, edit, and whatnot. And data validation, which is another great tool There are some things I want to point out before we jump into the file about that as it pertains to date formatting. And then we're going to deal with actual like fill in the blank type of form functionality in an Excel spreadsheet, and some very simple stuff in Visual Basic. You're actually going to be coders for the first time in this course. Although technically when you're dealing with functions in the formula bar, you are in a sense coding. So before we jump right into the files, which I have already downloaded, I want to jump back over to FOL there. Okay. So just jumping back into the week 10 content module. In week 10, you have an abnormally large amount of information in addition to the case instructions. So this is in case you run into any issues as you're doing some of these steps. And it talks about just general stuff to look out for when you're doing the work on the macro, which I think is 2 or 3 steps in total. And another little tip to do something right before you get out of it in case you're on a Mac and you don't have the ability to just get out of the print settings. And then there's these 2 issues with dates that, depending on your language settings, everyone always wants to type in the date exactly how they see it in the instructions. And that's not necessarily how it's going to work. And we have talked about this before in this course, but I'll make sure as we go through these steps, just as a result of naturally presenting the case, I'm going to be talking about this stuff. But I just wanted to make sure you knew all this information was there. And there's one more. Someone on their Mac just last semester had trouble turning on the developer tab. I think it was just that particular Mac, but anytime there's anything weird going on with week 10, because there is a lot of additional bells and whistles in this case, I always put it here in the content. So without further ado, let's get started on the case, which we're going to go right over here, the Mind Tap, and we're going to go into week 10. I've already downloaded the files. Close the book view. So I have the files in my download section. I'm just going to pull up the case submission, the download and submission screen, as you guys should, and you should grab the files right now. You can pause the video because you don't have yours yet. I already have mine. So I have the instructions here, I already have them open, and I have the case file here, the start file. So you'll notice right away the extension at the end of the file, and if your extensions aren't shown, you might notice that the icon is slightly different. I just hit pause there and went and added a normal Excel file, which, by the way, at Microsoft Office, just midstream, as I've been recording this new version of Comp 3077 online, has changed the look of their logos, which I don't know if I like the new one as much. Well, whatever. Looks a little bit slicker, I guess. So when you have a macro-enabled workbook, you'll notice the extension is different. It has an M at the end of it instead of an X, and it has this little exclamation mark in there to indicate there's macros in there. So macros are often interpreted by different virus protection programs and different firewalls and security measures on various computers as viruses. So it's important you understand that when you see a macro-enabled workbook, it might give you some messages that you need to be careful, and that's why. So I wanted to give you a heads up on that before we opened the file. I can get rid of that one now. So it will look a little bit different. And I also have Excel open just to start, before we get into step 1 of this case and start with the instructions. I want to show you how simple it is to save a workbook that is macro-enabled. So the first thing you're going to do is set it up for macros, which is going to be the beginning of our case. And then once you do that, when you go to Save As, don't just save. Go to Save As. Okay, I'm going to just throw this on my desktop. Doesn't really matter. You're going to have the option, or downloads is fine. When you drop down here, and this is exposing you to something I don't spend a lot of time on. I think I dealt with this in the very first week of the class, but you can save an Excel file as a variety of different types of files. Even older versions of Excel, you can save as CSV, so it can be loaded into some of those sort of proprietary company programs that use spreadsheet type of detail in some of their data, but it's CSV, XML, which is more of a web-based thing. You can do actually a web page. You can save as a template, so it's loaded up as a template, and that comes up, I think, near the end of the course. But here's the one for macro enabled, and it's that simple. You just go into the Save As section where it says Save as Type, and you choose macro enabled. And now it will be macro enabled. No, not a macro enabled template. Oops. Just macro enabled, straight up. And it's usually, yeah, near the top. I thought that was a little lower than usual. Right up at the top. It's a second option because typically it's just a standard workbook or a macro-enabled workbook. You save it, and then it's got the xlsm on there. Okay, that's how simple that is. So I'm going to close that up. I'm going to rename the file the same way we always do. I can get rid of that little sample one I just made. You can see the exclamation mark on there. It doesn't matter that it's a slightly different file type. It's still an Excel file. It's just a different type of Excel file. You're going to rename it same way you always do. You're going to open it up, and we're going to start with the top of the instructions, not technically the first instruction. So it talks about some basic stuff that you're going to be used to here, but it does say files downloaded from the website are safe and do not contain viruses, but due to recent Microsoft policy update, macros downloaded files are disabled by default. Okay, so first we're going to enable editing. Now I have enabled macros on my computer previously, but it's probably still going to say, hey, macros have been blocked. There's a security risk here. So depending on how you see this, you might get the same thing on your Mac as well. And you want to make sure that they are unblocked. So you're going to do this in the process of the steps you have at the beginning of the case here, not technically step one. So it says for PC, open your files, go to the folder, you save the file, right click, and unblock. So that's one really easy way to do it. You can also do it just simply by enabling all macros, but I'm going to show you both ways. And I think just for the sake of doing it, like on a Mac, you just need to click enable macros. That's it. We're going to do both on the PC just for the sake of understanding what they're talking about. So if you close the file back up, and I know I just made you open it, it's fine, just close it back up. This is all part of what we're learning today. Right click on the file and go to properties. So whatever version of Windows you're in, it shouldn't be that hard to find properties, which is right there, down at the bottom. It's usually down at the bottom. And down here where it says security, you can choose to unblock it. And depending on the security measures on your computer, it might tell you not to do that, but you can do it. You know it's safe. And now we'll open it back up. And it may still be having the macros sort of turned off, but you might not get the red band across the top with the security issue. So that's, and if you're on a Mac, all you had to do on a Mac was tell it to enable the macros. Okay, so now we don't have that security issue anymore. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily mean macros are all enabled here. So on a Mac and a PC, and this is slightly different on your Mac, you might have to actually Google that. I have a little bit of instructions in the week 10 drop down. I think on your Mac, you need to go to preferences to adjust stuff on the toolbar, and it just adds the macro tools to one of the existing tabs. It's slightly different, but if you Google it, it'll take you about 30 seconds to figure out how to do it. So on a PC, we want to add the macro tab, the developer tab to the toolbar, which mine is already turned on. So I'm actually going to turn it off and then turn it back on again. I forgot to do that. So the best way to do this on a PC is to go into File Options, and it'll pull up all these options in the window. And if you go to Customize Ribbon, it will give you the option to turn on and off certain things. Most of you will not have the developer tab turned on. So you didn't need to do what I just did. I was just turning it off. So right now, when you open your computers, it'll look like this. And by the way, what I just did was a demonstration on how to turn it off if you're annoyed after you're done with the week 8 case that you have the developer tab turned on there. It's not a big deal. And we actually don't put macros on the test because they're so sensitive to like slip ups and little typos and stuff. But here's what you need to do to start the case. So you do what I just did. You either enable the macros on a Mac, or you go to the file before you open it and unblock everything. And now once it's open, you go to File, Options. As soon as you get to Options, you go to Customize Ribbon. And under Customize Ribbon, if you scroll down a bit, you might not need to depending on your monitor, you're going to check the Developer tab box to turn it on. So right now you don't see that up here. As soon as you click OK, it will turn it on. And on a Mac, it's going to be slightly different. It's very easy to figure out. If you can't, just email your professor. We'll help you with it. But there is some information on that in the Week 10 content module in FOL too. So then you have the macro toolbar, or the macro tools, I should say, underneath the developer tab. and additional tools that we're going to use in this case. So one of the things I'm going to ask you to do here, and I believe you can do the same thing on your Mac as well, is as soon as you get the developer tab turned on, you go to macro security and you enable all macros. So by unblocking the file on a PC, this should be like that automatically, but it's possible it may not be. So just go and check and make sure it's on. And if that's the way it's set up, one more thing I'd like you all to do on Mac and PC, just to make sure this is properly opened with all the macro stuff set up. And this is just to avoid, I'll show you really quick. It's to avoid having your macros named like that because you haven't properly saved the file yet and you're saving on the fly. So what I would ask that you do once you set all this up, notice we haven't even started step 1 yet. Developer tab's on, macros are fully enabled. Close your file and reopen it one more time. And then you can start on step 1. Okay, so that everything we just did was all of this stuff. Okay, now we're going to go to step 1. So Mino Jung is in charge of public relations for Crest Financial. Let's flip back over there, please. Coordinating community service that provides employees serve as instructors for seminars for financial topics. Developing Excel workbook to track and record seminar information. Ask for your help. So go to seminars worksheet and unprotect it. So, and you see this a lot with banking and financial stuff. People use worksheet protection so that the other people in their office, their coworkers, other employees, can't mess with some of their functions in certain cells. And you can actually protect it with passwords and stuff like that too. So all of this is done very easily by going to the Review tab. So under the Review tab, you'll see a variety of things, a couple of which are Protect Sheet and Protect Workbook. So we're in the documentation sheet still. If we go to the seminars sheet, as the instructions told us, you should see the button Unprotect Sheet. Now, I do want to make a note. I'm doing this, I often get emails from students who have tried the case before I even post the video. And I did get an email from a student that said they did everything they thought they had to do. I hadn't shown them in the video what to do yet. But somehow when they went back into their file, the sheet was not protected anymore. It had already been unprotected simply by default. I think as a result of unblocking any security measures. And now I unblocked mine and it's still protected. It shouldn't really affect that. But in case you go to the seminars worksheet in your file and the sheet is already unprotected, just leave it. It's fine. That's what you're supposed to do. So mine is protected still. So the step would be unprotect the sheet. And that's literally it. If it was password protected, it would have asked me for the password. So when you go to protect the sheet, you actually have a variety of things you can protect. You can protect everything. You can protect just locked and unlocked cells. So when you're on a cell, any cell, if you right click and go to Format Cell and go to Secure Protection, the cell being locked means that when you go to protect the sheet, nobody can do anything to it. Okay, so if I re-protect the sheet here, which you don't need to do, I'm just showing you, and I try and type something in there, you can't type anything in because the sheet's protected. So this is a great way to maintain the integrity of your functions and formulas and stuff. But you might have one formula, or you might have like the name up here that you need people to be able to edit. So if you unprotect the sheet, and before it's protected, you go to Format Cells, and you unlock it, it functions exactly the same as a normal cell before the sheet's protected. But if I go protect the sheet now, and I try and type something in there, it will actually work. Okay, where all these other cells that are still locked, and they're locked by default, by the way. So it's a good way to keep things nice and tight and consistent with your files if you want it. You don't have to always password protect it, just from the standpoint of protecting it in general, people are more careful than when they go to unprotect. So that is the first part of step 1 there, is to unprotect. You can also protect the whole workbook here using that button. So some neat security measures we haven't really used before. And now that you're unprotected, that was all of step 1 actually. You are going to include an eye-catching title on the worksheet, which he shares with the seminar instructors. So insert WordArt as follows. So insert WordArt, fill black text 1. I don't think we've done anything like this since week 5. So make sure you choose the right WordArt, and it doesn't really matter where you're sitting because you're going to kind of get it into this span, and you're even going to use the picture to try and get it like close to where it should be. And it's one of those sensitive things that does sometimes get marked wrong when it shouldn't be. I'll try and give you the best location for it as I'm doing it. So insert WordArt using fill, black text 1, shadow. So sitting anywhere, I'm sitting down here. I would actually go up here. I would go to A1 or B1. And it doesn't specify that in the instructions. It just says insert WordArt, but that way at least it'll start your cursor there. Because once you go to insert, we're not doing illustrations or smart art. WordArt is under text if you have a monitor that's kind of squishing things like me. Otherwise, you'll see WordArt right on the menu under insert. And we are choosing fill, black text 1, shadow. I think it's the first one. It is. Fill, black text 1, shadow. I've always kind of reviewed these cases a little bit ahead of time. So I think regardless of where you're sitting, it just drops it right in the middle of the spreadsheet. I just think it's a best practice not to be randomly sitting somewhere. So it didn't really change anything. So we are going to grab the edge of it here and move it up here so it's not over top of the text before we put the text in that we want. So put the text in financial seminars. You can copy that, but you got to be careful because it will take on that formatting. So if you're going to copy that so you don't have to type it out, you need to double click. This is a text box, right? Like a title box over a chart. Double click to get in there. And when you paste, see how little that is? That's not the formatting you're supposed to have. When you use WordArt as part of a SAM case, they want the WordArt formatting. And as usual, if you did it that way, you can keep the text only and it should format it exactly like the WordArt was formatted, which is what you want. So you can type it in or you can paste it in the way I just did. Once you get the text in there, you don't have to mess with it per se. Yeah, just click outside the box so you're not, because if you start editing text with the cursor active, it'll only edit the stuff you're on or right next to. Change the text fill of the WordArt to Aqua Accent 4. So without the text being active, again, don't be in here or on any specific part. Once you get that text in there, click outside the box and then click. See, it activates automatically when you click in there. What you have to do is make sure you click the border of the box so your cursor is not active. Otherwise, when you do this, it's not going to make the whole thing blue. Now, of course, as we are very accustomed to, when you created this new object in Excel, it has its own toolbar, its own tab, its own menu tab, and you're going to change text fill to Aqua Accent 4. So shape fill is over here, shape outline, shape effects, text fill, okay? So Aqua Accent 4. So Aqua, it's probably that one, I guess. Aqua, yeah. And it didn't give you a percentage there. And you can see when you hover over it, it's the same color as the background of that print setup button. So just click it. Make sure you're on text fill. Make sure you've done the whole thing and you weren't active with the cursor and just a little bit of it. Move the WordArt to row 1 so that it spans columns B to G. So it doesn't say to resize it. It just says to move it to row 1, and it says to have it in B. So already we want it B to G, and you can see it's past G. So we're going to move it all the way over in B. It's still pretty far over. I wonder if that's going to be fine. I'm just going to check that for 1 sec here. So B to G, because it indicates no resizing. So I just checked, like it's pretty darn close. And it does look like the S is still within the G. And mine, I mean, it could be a little further over, but I also checked the solution file. I paused it there, and the solution file has it like over top of the print setup button. So I think as long as you're not encroaching onto row 2 and you're not past column A with the border of the box, you should be fine. Because it doesn't say anything about resizing it. And I know it will be. I'm sure it will be. So save your file, and let's move on to step 3. See, I was down there looking at that. Mino created the print setup button on this worksheet. Uses around it, and you're going to do a button in a minute. You're going to work with some buttons at least. He has asked you to make it possible to click the shape, the button, to run the print setup macro. So there's a macro that's already in this file. These tools you set up. A macro is a series of recorded steps that's saved as code that will then automatically execute that and make it run in your file if you run the macro from the macro menu, or if you assign a macro to a button and hit the button. So we haven't done a macro yet. Don't get all wrapped up in that. Let's just do what this step is asking you to do. So this print setup thing, if you left click it, it's not going to run a macro yet. It's just, if you left click a button that already has a macro attached to it, it'll run the macro. So all I got to do is left click it and then right click it and go to assign macro. So before I do that, if you were to go to that developer tab we added on here and go over to this macro area in the toolbar and go to macros, you're going to see that one of the macros is print setup. And we're going to do this a little later in the case, but you can go and edit and look at the code in Microsoft's coding program and stuff. So it is there. He just forgot to assign it. So all you have to do once you highlight the button is right click the button, go to assign macro, and it will give you the options you have there, which should just be these three. And you should choose print setup and click OK. And that's all the step told you to do. It didn't tell you to run the macro. It just said, make it possible to click the shape to run it. So you've done that. Now step number 4. G13H21 is designed to list the number of instructors trained to conduct each seminar. The average number of instructors from the range H15 to H20 should be displayed in H21. However, that cell displays an error because no data has been entered in H15. Mino asks you to display a message instead of an error. So this will be the third time we've used if error. You'd be surprised how often this comes up in the real world right now, because people can generally get by in Excel, but if they see something like they see here in H21, they're like, okay, I don't know what's going on there. It might be difficult for them to figure. Now, what it's probably doing is it's taking the average of H15, H20, so H15, H20, and there's nothing in there. So it doesn't have any data. So it's saying you're dividing by nothing, and I don't have a number for you. And that's fine, but it would be more easily interpreted if the message said, no, so this is exactly like we did last week. So you literally take the function in there that they don't tell you to change, because it would work if there were numbers here. You take this, it's just an average function, highlight it in the formula bar, cut it. Okay, try not to pick up the equal sign. If you do, you're going to have to type one in and then get rid of it when you paste it in there. Start an if error function. You can auto-complete it if you want. Parenthesis is there. Go to the fx, paste what you took out of there. I mean, you could have just typed that out even. And then here, you will put the text, and I would type the text. And you do not need the quotes, just like last week. The quotes are there to show you that it's quoted text, but if you copy quotes from Word and paste them into the formula dialog box in Excel, they often aren't interpreted as quotes. It will put the quotes in for you. Maybe not on every quiz, but in Excel, generally it puts the quotes in for you. You just have to paste the data in there, which is text this time. It's there. You click OK, and now it shows you that new message, which makes a lot more sense if people don't know how Excel works. That's the point. There might be people looking at this that don't really understand Excel, so when they see that division error, because it's dividing by nothing, they don't know what that means. This makes a lot more sense. So that was step number 4. Okay, now we are going to the evaluations worksheet. So this is just generally all we're doing this is what I like about like week 10. It's not a long case. I took a long time to get to step 1 because you had to set up your file and do all this stuff, but it has all these really neat auditing type of tools, the last of which we've already done. So step number 5, go to the evaluations worksheet. There, so I just wanted to pull up that page because we're going to use a pretty interesting function here. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this case, there's lots of stuff in here about this auditing and automating and just making things just easier to interpret. So this is a function that allows you to create a name for a calculation as it's working through the other functions to calculate the answer. So I guess that's the best way I can kind of describe it if you want to pause the video and look at how Google defines it. And we're going to do this backwards, and I'm going to show you why. If we jump back to the instructions here, we have to deal with some if functions down here. And there was a reason I preemptively showed you last week how to do a nested if. I said, this is really cool. Not only can you have multiple questions at the start of an if, you can have an if where if the answer is false, it asks another question. So we're going to do that here, and we're going to put it inside of the let function. So the easiest way to do this, so you don't have to type it all out, is to build it first and then go in reverse. So that's what we're going to do. So I just need you to follow along very carefully. And remember, as always, you can pause me and go back. And so we're not going to go here and go equals let and start a let function. We're actually going to go here and start an if function. So we're going to go equals if. And if we go back here, you'll see that there's calculations that have to do with if. It says for the calculation argument, enter an if function that displays excellent if average is greater than 8. And a second if function that displays good and average. So we're just doing the first thing first. We're going to display if. Now average, AVG, hasn't even been created by the let function yet. But as long as you code it correctly, it will then ultimately work when you paste the nest into the let function. So this is once again nesting. So do this in sequence as I'm doing this. First thing we're doing is the first part of part D for number 5. So we're going equals if, and we're going to ask if the average is greater than 8, not greater than or equal to, we're going to display the word excellent. So equals if AVG, which has not yet been created, if it's greater than 8, we're going to put excellent in here. See how there's a name error because it doesn't know what that is yet. And that's fine. Excellent. Make sure you type it right. You don't need to cut and paste that. It's one word. Just make sure you spell it right. Remember how I taught you last week in the video, even though it wasn't a step. If you then don't have a false value and you need to ask another question, you leave that blank. You click OK. No, I don't want to accept that correction. Okay, you leave it exactly how you did it. If you get that same message, you do not accept the correction. I forgot it was going to do that. Then you go inside the parenthesis, you add a comma, and you start another if. You can do this by typing if with both parentheses, and then go to the function wizard inside of those parentheses, or you can simply go to the formulas tab and pull up if from right here, and you don't have to type anything. So it puts them in for you. Because you can't do the single parenthesis like I've been teaching you for weeks if you're doing a function inside a function. So now we're nesting our second if, which is the latter part of part D. So if the average is greater than 8, and then a second if that displays good if the average is greater than 6. Okay? So back to Excel. Is AVG greater than 6? That's good. And then finally, at the bottom of 5 there, needs improvement. You can copy that if you want, just don't copy the quotes. So scared of typos. Needs improvement. And when you click OK, it'll put the quotes in for you. And now you have this nested if. So you built this cool nested if, which you can't figure out what's going on yet because you don't have anything you've created called average. The let function will create the cell named AVG because it's you're referencing a named cell there. So now we're going to go back up and we're going to start our let function. And in the let function, you're also completing the average, but you can nest that yourself because average is pretty easy to type out. Okay. So before you do that, you're going to take everything you just built, just like we did. I think they were just making you do the if error to practice something like this. And there are professors and teachers that will make you type all that out inside of the dialog box, like the function wizard for let, and you don't want to do that. So again, to review, before we do this, I have my first if. If I click on that if, and I click on the fx, you see it was, if average is greater than 8, put excellent. And then I left this blank and built this in there afterwards. So if I want to see what that one looks like, I go click inside of the next if, and I hit the fx. And that's the ultimate. And you can do that 255 times. You can nest an if. So this is working. I know you may not think so because it has that name error, but that's only because you haven't created the name AVG yet. So take everything in there, cut it, just like if error. Start a let function. Get your parenthesis in there. Go to the fx. And it's going to be AVG is the name. And you're going to do an average of C4 to E4. So don't type the equal sign. You just type the function. Average C4 colon E4, or you can, whatever, and it's working. And then here, paste. and it's actually working now. So that is how this is built. And if you arrow back over in the bottom field, you'll see that's just everything. It's everything you cut. And when you click in there, it'll keep trying to give you more fields like I showed you last week. But you just need those top 3. So if you click OK and you don't get what I get, it's because somewhere along the way you messed up the nested if. It's going to be the nested if. So this is a pretty involved step in a case. I don't want to say it's super difficult or hard. It's only involved because you're doing things you can do, but then you're putting more. So you nested, right? You nested this if inside of this if, and then you nested the whole thing inside of the let function. And you nested an average in there along the way. So it's a pretty, and what it's doing is it's naming, identifying this in the process of making the function as AVG, so you don't have to go back and name it. And then it's checking that thing you just named. It's a pretty cool function. I've never used this. I think there's very few things in the course I've never used, but learning this, and this is a fairly new function, learning how to do this, I can think of instances where I would use it. So once you do that, fill handle, drag down, and if you go to the instructions, you should see your answers matching up with those. So that's, to me, that's a bigger step than the macro on this case. I mean, that's a bit of a doozy because it's nesting and nesting and nesting. But if you follow along with the video, you shouldn't have any trouble. Why am I missing that? Oh, there it is right there. I kept scrolling past it. Excellent, good, excellent. Yep, that looks the same. On to step 6. Save your file. And if you mess it up, just keep deleting it and watching the video and redoing it. I was very deliberate about the way I completed that. I mean, technically it feels like more than just one step. So number 6, we're going to use some data validation. And this is one of those things in the week 10 content I was going on about how you might have issues with your dates. I think mine will actually work because I have the same I have month, day, year in my computer. But I'm going to do it the other way anyway, just to show you that's the way you should do it, just to avoid any issues, even if the formatting and the order of your month, day, and year are correct. So go to the instructors worksheet. So we're done with that worksheet now. We're on to instructors. And in the instructors worksheet, the size of the instructor's polo shirt, so which the bank provides the instructors, because this polo shirt, that's one of those, that's like boogie boarding, right? It's really just a golf shirt, but polo's a brand. I like that they put that in there. It makes this case feel so American. Because seminars, not that I don't want it to be Canadian, I'd rather be more Canadian in terms of cultural references, because seminars start on September 12th and end November 14th. He wants you to make sure that nobody enters a date that doesn't fall within this range. So that's all they're trying to do. So in D4 to D17, you're going to create a data validation rule. If you mess this up and you have typos in there, you simply re-highlight the same exact cells and it will bring you into the existing rule and you can fix it. If you mess up the range, you'd have to get rid of the rule and then redo it, which is technically just as easy. So we're just going to do it right the first time. Create a data validation rule that accepts dates. Okay, and it's, sorry, I lost the range. D4 to D17. So first step, highlight D4 to D17. So all the data is already in there. All we're doing is making it so people can't change this outside of the range it should be in. Okay, and this is under, of course, data. And in the data tab, you have data tools, one of which is data validation here. Okay, so we've used some of this other stuff. So we're going to use data validation, and then it's going to say, okay, cool. So you want to do data validation. Is it any value? Is it, what is it? And it is actually date. And typically when you're doing dates for validation, it's between. You could do equal, less than, you could do all this stuff, but it's generally between, so they default to that. And what you're going to do here is you're going to type in a date that no matter what your system language settings are, Excel will recognize. Because see how on my computer right now, it's showing year, month, day. I actually don't know if I have the same settings, but I'm going to just help you guys avoid this altogether. Do not type in 9/12/29. What you're going to do is you're going to type in September, spelled correctly, September 12th, comma, space, 2029. And it will see that as 9/12/29. You type in the long date. And this is what instructions in the week 10 FOL content module are going on about. To November 14th, 2029. So again, type in November 4th. You don't have to try it by typing it. Just type the long date in. It's a good thing to do. It's a best practice. 2029. And make sure you put the space after. That is the official proper way to do a long date format in English. Spell out the month, space, type out the 1 or 2 digit day, comma, space, type out the year. Now, if you click OK, and by accident, you're not actually done yet. You got to go back in, and if you go to the same data validation that you already built, it should be in there, and then look what happens. It puts it in the format automatically of whatever your computer is. See how that worked? That's why I did that. Also, if you screwed it up and you included more cells than you should have, that's the other place where you can go and just clear it, right? You got to highlight the cells you put it in and you clear it. So we're not quite done yet. Just go back to the data validation we already have in the cells. It's date between. And if I typed out the long dates again and clicked OK, they would revert right back to this. And Sam will mark that right. I'm telling you right now, Sam will mark that right. Input messages. If you have a space, if you have anything extra in here that shouldn't be in there, one typo, it will mark the whole thing wrong. So as we're going through the rest of this, create an input message that is seminar start date. Copy that text. Do not pick up extra spaces. And show input message. Check the box if you need to. Your settings might not require that. Show input message when cell is selected. Seminar start date. And then enter to start instruction, and the period is included. Okay? So put that in there. So notice it's already showing there. So I went out of it and went back in again just so you guys can see how that works. So as you're doing this, make sure that box is checked. This has the period. If there's a space there, Sam will mark it wrong. I know that's frustrating, but it is what it is. So make sure it's exactly the way it was. Then go to error alert. You may or may not have to check this box. Most of you probably will. When you check the box, in the case you do have anything here, just highlight it and backspace it or delete it. Just clear it out. And you're setting this to stay as stop style, but there is a couple different options here. The SAM requirements here for this one are stop style. And just like the last one, now for the error alert, you're going to put invalid date. I mean, I could type that, but whatever. Copy and paste everything. Invalid date as the title, and the error message is the sentence they have here. And again, it includes the period with no extra spaces. Does include the period. Paste it in there. As long as everything is put in correct, the only reason people get this one wrong is because they highlighted too many cells or they have a typo in here. Click OK. And now when you click on these cells, that stuff comes up. And when you have an error, like these two have errors, it'll tell you what's going on there, right? So it's a pretty cool tool, especially if you had like thousands of entries that you want to take note of the ones that are messed up. So, and there's other things you can do too. Like you can, with the same selection, you can circle the invalid data and then it identifies it more easily than the comment it put in there. So these are comments that are technically in there that are being put in as a result of the data validation. Now, if you do that, you want to uncircle those because that's not, see, notice how I'm highlighting the data validation. Once I've circled it, I can clear the circles, and then the next clear would be clear the rules, which you're not going to do because you just put it in there. As long as you put all the text in right, you're going to get it right. So Mino wants to make sure all the dates entered in the seminar are actually valid. So identify and correct as follows. So now we have to do the circles. So I was just preemptively showing you that. So highlight those same cells, circle invalid data, leave them circled, and go and change the dates. And then they will uncircle themselves automatically. And somebody already told me they didn't do the circles, they just changed the dates. Somehow Sam knew. I think they had something else wrong. I think they had a typo, but they were insisting they got it wrong because they didn't circle the dates before they changed them. So one is September 26th, and the other one is September 12th. Okay, so the first invalid date should be September 26th. It's currently the 11th, so just change the 11 up in the formula bar to 26. Don't mess with the date format. Whatever it decided to do when you know, whatever the format is, you leave it. And then the next one is September 12th. And this one is set to October 9th. Oh, no, it's September. No, you're just changing the 10 to a 12. And now they're both fixed. And the circles go away and the error alerts go away too. That's it. Save your file. And I believe we are moving on to the next worksheet. We are. Go to the assignments worksheet with your file saved. So now is the point in the instructions when we start dealing with macros finally, which is one of these things I put in the beginning of the list that comes up in this case because it's a cool tool. Not a lot of people use it when they should, and it can end up saving a lot of time. It's as I've explained, it's a tool that records the things you're doing in Excel so you can play them back later in the case you might have something you do over and over again and you're getting annoyed by that. So this particular case, and I didn't mention this at the beginning, I'm bringing this up now because I want to step outside the instructions and just demonstrate the creation of a simple macro for you, just to show you how they work. I think so many professors complain how sensitive Sam was about the creation of the macro in this exact case that I keep using. I've used this 3 times now from 3 different versions of the same book. They just took it out. They just have you generally just playing with macros earlier in the chapter. And then here in this case, they have you using them and editing them. So I'm going to actually make one with you, but you do not have to do this. So I want to make that clear. So I don't know if you noticed this, but on the sheet we're still on. I haven't gone to assignments yet. I know I said go to assignments, but I've gone back here because I want to demo. You do not have to do this. I'm just trying something to show you how simply you can record like a quick macro. Let's say every time you get this file, you want to sort this by date so you can highlight the latest possible date. Now, you could have the creation of a table as part of your macro, but the table's already made. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but this is a table. So what you need to do, and this will become part of the macro, is you need to do these steps while you're recording, and then you can just play it back every time you get a file like this, and you put this into the file. This could work on any worksheet, right? So you get a new worksheet for trained instructors, and you just run the macro. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to that developer tab we set up because you need to, you're not doing anything. Usually macros don't include steps or actions that would be something overly complicated. That, I mean, you could maybe do a macro for that, that nested let function we just did, but this is a table, and every time I get this, I set up a new training, like a trained instructor spreadsheet, and I put the new data on the table, and then I have to sort it and highlight the latest possible date. I'm just coming up with a simple example. So if you sit in it, you may not have noticed this, but it's a table. I think I just mentioned that. So what you're going to do is go to that developer tab that we added on here, and these 2 simple steps you're going to do while you're recording, and that's the only difference. And then you can go and play them back. So I'm going to do this as an example. And again, you do not have to do this, just watch. So I'm going to record macro, and I'm going to call this latest date. And just like naming cells and naming tables, you can have spaces in there, and you can use capitals to identify a new word, stuff like that. You can have a keyboard shortcut for this. You can add a little description. It can be applicable to a new workbook. I usually do these in files that I'm already using. And I click OK. As soon as I click OK, I am now recording. So there's a stop button up instead of a record button. So everything I do that's a hard action will become part of that macro. Like you switching windows and going back and forth in and out of Excel, and the time I take to do this, it doesn't become the macro. It's just the hard actions I take. So the first thing I want to do here is sort by date in this table. And I can see that the filter buttons are off. So I'm going to turn the filter buttons on, and I'm going to sort date oldest to newest, or newest to oldest. Okay, so I have the latest dates on the top, and then I'm going to highlight the latest possible date by using conditional formatting. Okay, which is stuff you can do. So I'm going to go conditional formatting. I'm going to go greater than, and I'm going to go greater than September. It actually did that for me. I was going to go greater than September, whatever. Let's go greater than September 25th. So everything on the last day, it's still the same thing. Because you can do greater than a date, right? But that's not, and then let's say I wanted to do this type of conditional formatting or a custom format, whatever. Let's do the green. Let's click OK. And now I don't have to do that every time, because if I now go to the developer tab and stop recording, that now has become a macro. It says macro was successfully recorded. I don't need to save the script. It's a pretty simple macro. We're going to deal with some coding in a minute. So now I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to show you something. So now I'm going to go and I should be able to undo that without actually... There. So I turned off the filter. I just undid because what you did in the macro didn't. So now sitting anywhere in this spreadsheet, if I didn't want to have to do all those steps, I can go to macros and I can go to that one I just made, latest date, and I can run it. And it does all that stuff. Like, how cool is that? Like, think if you had a bunch of stuff to do in a row, and that's the way this case used to be set up. It had like 10 steps in the macro, and everybody would get it wrong, and it'd just be a nightmare to go and get it. So now it doesn't even have the macro created that you do in the chapter in this book. But in these last two cases, there were two things. Last week, nested if, and this week, the creation of a macro that I wanted to make sure you're comfortable with. Now, I'm going to undo that one more time because I don't want to make changes to the... Oh, you can't undo the running of a macro. That's funny. So I'm actually going to close my file because I just saved it. If you did do that, it would be very easy to undo. If you copy what I just did here, I'll do it without undoing. First thing you're going to do is go to developer and get rid of the macro you made so Sam doesn't have any issues there. Delete. And then you're going to... How do you undo the sort? I don't know that it will matter, but I'm going to turn off the conditional formatting, clear rules, and then let me just check this really quick. You know what? I'm just going to show you how to fix this because I don't want... If you guys actually try to do that with me and yours is now stuck like mine is, where I've removed the conditional formatting, but it's sorted by date. When I look at all I had to do was look at the instructions to figure out how it was sorted. It's sorted by last name, but both the first and last names are in one cell. And we could use a write function and we could do all sorts of crap. Easiest thing to do right now, if you hadn't saved your file right before that, and I don't want to open and close and lose anything I've done. So I've taken off the conditional formatting. I'm now going to turn off the filter button, and I'm going back to Sam. This is how, if you run into this on a test, I'm glad I'm actually doing this. And I'm going to re-download the original start file. Okay? And just wait. I know you did the data validation. Just wait. There's a way around that too. This is only if you actually did this. Otherwise, you can skip this completely. And I'm going to open that file up. You guys know how I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to paste text only, and then data validation is going to stay in there. So this is... Come on. Jeez. Okay. Enable editing. You don't have to worry about the security risk. You're just looking for this data, right? So this is how the data is there. So you're going to copy this data so it's in the exact same order because I think they're going to check the cells for those two dates that you fixed. And then you're going to go here and you're going to paste values only. And then if you go in here, data validation is all still there. Oh, and you have to refix these dates too. What a mess I've created by trying to teach you guys something extra. No big deal. That's easy enough to do too. Hey, you're learning more, but I'm leaving all this in the video. This is good stuff. So we're going to go back, and those two dates are September 26th and September 12th. So September 11th goes to 26, enter. September 10th goes to September 12th, enter. And I got rid of the macro too, but that's an example of how to make a macro. I'm going to save my file again, and now I'm going to move on to the assignments worksheet. So now, that thing I just made, we're going to be dealing with that a little bit here. So go to the assignments worksheet once a week. Mino has his staff instructors seminars using the form on this worksheet. Mino has created two macros. So the clear form macro in the Visual Basic Editor should delete everything that's in. So this step is only to show you how even though it's coding, it's not that hard to fix a macro if you don't want to have to get rid of it and redo it. So there's a macro that should delete the values D4 to D8, and it's set to something else, and it's the clear form macro. And once you fix it, you're going to assign it to the button like we did at the beginning. So this button's assigned to nothing right now, but it wants you to fix the macro first. So it wants you to clear the data from D4 to D8. So that's what the macro is supposed to do, and there's something wrong with it. And it's not assigned to this button yet. We're going to do that in a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the Visual Basic Editor, which is Microsoft's coding platform, and figure out where it's going to C4 to C8, and we're just going to fix it. So it says in the clear form macro VBA code, change this statement so it's D4 to D8. So if you're looking at that statement, this is very simple to do. So when we go in here, you don't need to be on those cells. Doesn't matter where you're at. You just go to macros, and then you go to the, oh, this stuff again. Okay, I'm actually really glad this happened, because I provide a very vague explanation of this in the week 10 content in FOL, but here's why this happens. So notice how every time I went in here before, I just had these simple, like, macro names. There wasn't all this file path crap. What's happening here right now is that I have another file open that also has macros. Remember how I just had to fix that thing? So I downloaded the original start file, and then I used it to fix the data. So that's why those are there. And if I went to the other file, it'd show the fact that there's two files open with identical macro names makes it even more confusing. But a lot of you have really bad habits of having like the one you renamed and you're working on it, and then you've got this other file that you opened at the beginning and saved as that name. And it's usually not a big deal, although I've been telling you not to do this since week 1. But in the macro case, if you have these two files open, it's going to have all this extra stuff there. Now watch this. If I go to that file that I had open that I don't need anymore, and I just close it, I don't have to close and reopen this one. I just go back to macros, and those are the only ones that are available to edit right now. So that's why that happens. I just want to make sure you understand that. So we are going to the clear form macro, and we're going to sit on it, and we're going to click edit, and it's going to open up this other program. This is Microsoft's like application-based coding platform. And you'll see where it says edit the code below C4 to C8. Okay? And you're going to change that. Okay? And it's still fine that it goes back to C4 when it's done. They didn't say to mess with that. They just said find where it says edit the code below and edit the code above comments. And there's two of them, actually. And you need to make them say D4 to D8. Because if we go back to the file, which is still open, you haven't left the file, this is the stuff we're moving out of here. These are just the labels, right? See, if you don't want to get rid of those. So going back into Visual Basic, where it says edit the code below, we're going to change that D4 to D8. Oh, and then it says edit the code above right below it. So it is just the one spot. I didn't think they'd change these instructions. D4 to D8, and that's literally it. And then if you scroll down, you'll see the further references here for other ranges and stuff. But that's all you have to do is change that. At which point you don't actually have to save. When you're editing in Visual Basic, those changes are automatically part of that macro in that file now. So you can return to Microsoft Excel by just doing this, but then Visual Basic is still open. I think the quiz question has you close and return to Microsoft Excel, or you can just hit the X in the corner. But when the quiz question asks you to do that, you got to do exactly this, I'm pretty sure. So now when we go to use this macro, after we assign it to the button, it will clear that out for the next instructor details. So that's it. You just became a coder. It's that simple. And then it said scroll down, look at the other code, which we did. There wasn't anything you actually did in part C. And then it says assign the clear form macro to the button. We did this at the beginning of the case, so just right click on the button, assign macro, clear form, click OK. Except this time we get to run it. Use the clear form macro to clear the form and test the macro to make sure it's clearing D4 to D8 like it should. So click, you're going to have to click on it click off it and then left click on it. Totally worked. I actually did it twice. It doesn't matter. That's just a clear macro. The next one actually moves the stuff into another sheet. It's kind of cool. So that's step number 8 with some additional information on what to do if you get all those funky macro names in there with the file path attached to it. Just means the other file's open, that's it. The add instructor macro should copy the data from D4 to D8 on the assignments worksheet to the instructor's worksheet. So find that. So we're going to put some data in a minute, but first we're going to set this macro up. And to do this, we're going to make a button. So we've done a couple buttons and assignments. We're actually going to make the button this time. So this is similar to like inserting WordArt or inserting a picture, except when you insert from Microsoft, you get to draw. This is more like that. You get to draw it out, so it won't just appear like the WordArt does. So sitting anywhere, doesn't really matter. Even with those cells highlighted, it doesn't make any difference. You go to the Developer tab, and under Insert, it's the first option there. And you can see there's like radio buttons and like drop downs and cool stuff here. You could teach a whole course on how to create automated forms for like retail stores and special events and stuff, and signing people up and things like that, like just in Excel. Like there's so many different things you could do. This is just scratching the surface. So we're going to make our own button this time. So when you click it, you get, when you scroll back over top of the worksheet, you see you have the cross cursor, which means it's ready to draw. So you can just go generally in the area you want and draw it out. I made mine really big. It does not need to be like that. You're going to resize it anyway. And as soon as you do that, it'll give you some kind of name for it. But this time, like the last one, you're just assigning it to add instructor. So click add instructor, click OK, and that's now there. Now, of course, as soon as you make a button and it's highlighted, you have a shape format menu. And you are going to size it precisely how it says, 0.3 inches high, 1.8 inches wide. If you are on a Mac or any computer that's set to centimeters up here, do not go into Google and convert it. Just type in 0.3 shift quote, right? Just type in the inches. And when you hit enter, it'll probably reconvert to centimeters, but it will interpret that exact size in inches. Down here, type in 1.8 inches. Just type the quote. And most of you, it depends on your graphics card. I don't know why the picture, if you scroll down, it shows these as looking as the same exact height. They're not. If you click on that one and check the height, it's actually not as tall. So just do the height, ignore it if it doesn't look exactly the same. Your job is just to line up as closely as you can the top of each button. So I'm just sliding it over there to make sure it's in line, and then I'm sliding it back to make sure it's in column D. It's a little over, so like, oops, I think I just ran that macro. Left click, so you get, left clicking gets you into the edit mode. By the way, I should have said that already. Right clicking, sorry, jeez. Right clicking gets you into the edit mode. There, you just don't want to, you want the top of the rectangle close to the top of the other one, and you don't want it going over the borders. You could still move it a tiny bit to the left just to make sure it's nice and centered. Yes, there, good enough. Okay, now, align, edit the text to say add instructor, and make sure before you go out of there it's Trebuchet 11. So right click, edit text, and you can copy and paste that, and it won't take the formatting at all. Actually, it's different than WordArt. Paste that in there. Sitting somewhere in the text, you can go to the Home tab and just check the text. This doesn't have the text thing pop up like it does when you're in the chart boxes. So it is Trebuchet 11. So just click outside the button, and now you've got that button ready to use. So now when you put this data in there, it's going to go into those cells and then be transferred back to the instructor worksheet. This is a pretty cool macro, actually. So are you going to type this stuff out? No, you're not going to type this stuff out. That is silly. Just copy the cells. You don't even have to transpose. You're going from column laid out cells in a Word table to column cells in Excel. Just copy down. Don't copy extra, just the cells. Right click, copy. We do have to fix the date, just hang on. Come over here, go into the first cell, paste, match destination formatting, okay? Now right away, before you click the button, which is gonna take what's in those cells and transfer it into this row here, and that doesn't matter where your mouse is sitting, that just happened to be where it was. you're going to fix the date, because otherwise you'll get this wrong and you'll get this wrong. And it's whether or not you actually have to do it is another story. But if I sit here, you can see it's just text. So once again, I'm going to go, just to make sure, I'm going to go into this cell and I'm going to type in the long date, which is September 26th, 2029. I'm going to hit enter, and then it formats it with my current default date format that I picked up on when I opened this file. So, sorry, I kind of leaned back there. I got a little far from the mic. I'm sure you could still hear me. So now, with all of that in there, and with this date fixed, because you did the long date thing, I'm going to hit the button. That stuff's going to disappear. And I'm going to go over here, and it's going to have shown up right here. It's pretty cool. Like that's row 18. So when you scroll down now, that's what you should see. And you can go and check all your photos now. That is the completion of this case with my added little mini lesson on macros, and then how to get back to the exact data, because I couldn't undo what the macro did. I could only undo the things I'd done when I hadn't run it via the macro. Yeah, so I'm going to close my file. It's going to prompt me to save all changes. I'm going to click save, and I'm going to go back and submit for 100%. Let's go. There's a rare situation where I actually had 2 copies of the file, which I always tell you guys not to have. That's because I had to fix that situation there. So upload in, name is good, submit the file, grade summary report. Here we go. Moment of truth, always my favorite part. So everything you saw in that file, which just came from the web, by the way, so you're going to get that same thing again about blocking the macros, that was 100% completion. So it did work. What I did where I made you the sample macro and then undid what I'd done by taking the data from the original file, that did work. Okay, so everything's good there. One more thing I'm going to throw in at the end here, because this case deals with comments at a fairly basic level in terms of having comments as a result of data validation. But I never actually, I'll just open up the original file. I never actually showed you guys how easily you can create comments, which is also under that same menu. So if I wanted to make a comment on this one here, because that person has expertise in a certain field, and you go to data, and under the comments menu, review tab. See, this is why I'm showing you this stuff. Comments menus under review tab. You can create a comment there. It says, Gupta has a doctorate in finance. So maybe that's extra teacher, right? So post. And now you've got this comment. You can edit it by going there. So if you click off it, you can't see the comment. But if you hover over it, the comment will come up. And you can click the edit button from there. You can show all comments. And then you can scroll through comments this way. So comments are just helpful little things. Notes are a bit different, where you add notes to a worksheet in general. Like you can add that to specific cells, but you can put more information in there, where I think the comment eventually will limit you. So I just wanted to throw that in at the very end, because I did discuss us going over comments here in the PowerPoint notes. And that's it for week 10. As always, do not forget to do the quiz. This quiz, I believe, is a little bit shorter. Not too bad. And as usual, it will emulate some of the stuff you learned here. And that's it for this week. We'll see you in the next one for week 11.